We could stay here, you and
Alright, so as I begin to prep this new phase of training, just going into a general preparation phase after 12 weeks in doing strength, and I'm going to be introducing some new movements that I haven't done in quite a long time. I'm just freeing up my thoracic, which likes to get a little bit sticky as part of my warm-up. I hit the Stairmaster for 5 minutes first, just to get really the blood flow going in the legs. So here, yeah, just trying to push the chest towards the floor to try and get an improvement in thoracic extension. Usually after about 5 or 6 with a 3 or 4 second hold, I start to feel it free up, and it just loosens my spine up and helps me get into a better position. My internal hip rotators are always a bit tight, so just spending a bit of time going in and out on those. Both legs, just warming the lower spine up first and going into single leg. Done a lot of work on those over the last couple of months, and they're starting to play the game, which is good, because deep squats starting to feel a lot better with more internal hip rotation. So I'm pretty happy about that, and just keeping myself, treating it more like a bit of a dynamic warm-up. It's pretty cold this time of year, so trying to stay as warm as possible to get the most out of the training session that I've got planned. Here, I don't really need a lot of ankle range of motion in this workout today, but I just make it a bit of a standard anytime I'm warming up or doing any mob work, just to get stuck into my ankles a little bit. My left ankle's quite annoying. I rolled it quite a few times when I was younger, and it's always giving me grief, and just causes little rotations in the bottom of the squat. So I try and hit it once a day if possible, and just rotate through different ways of doing it. So there I was just sort of like going left and right and holding load on it, sort of going into pronation, going into supination, and just trying to free that up, just trying to remind it that there is more range there, and it's slowly starting to play the game too, which is good. So here, just stretching out the external rotators of the hip. I have pretty good flexibility through this area, but it's just kind of a staple. I just like to free that up a little bit. It always makes movement feel a little better. And I'm just sort of searching, because it changes on a day-to-day basis, guys. So one day you're going to feel quite loose in certain areas of the hips, and other days it's going to be a bit tighter. So we are a daily product of what we do. So I'm always just sort of going searching and having a bit of a feel around to see what's currently going on. So back up into a little bit more ankle work and the adductors, just sort of opening up the hips in the bottom squat position, just freeing up any tension. Again, that left side for me, that left adductor is always holding more than the right, so it's just part of my sort of general warm-up. Whether I kind of need that extra range in the session or not, I always just like to just remind it and just open it up a little bit, and just try and get that freedom a little bit more optimal. So I really encourage you guys just to treat your dynamic warm-up as a bit of an investigation of self, and just feel into what you're stretching, because we do carry imbalances left to right, and ideally we want to balance them out before we even worry about creating more of an optimal range of motion. So here, just going into a downward dog, just again a little bit more thoracic work, releasing a bit of calves, the bottom of the hamstrings, and some serratus anterior work. Again, that's a staple for me, whether I'm doing upper body or lower body, especially my right scapula and my right serratus tends to be a little lazy, so I'm always getting stuck into that. Even if it's just for a set or two before I get started, it just helps me to feel more structurally sound, with whatever movements I'm doing for the day. So at the top of the downward dog, all I'm really trying to do here is just keep the bum high, drive the heels down towards the floor, and just get that thoracic into extension by just pushing the chest kind of towards or the direction of my feet. So from here, that's pretty much the general mode warm-up sequence. I'm going into a few exercises to activate now. Just jumping on the abductor machine just to get the glutes full of blood and, up and firing. Just trying to get a good squeeze in that shortened position. There's no fatigue at all in this set. It's really just about, I'm probably using a weight that I could do 30 or 40 reps, and I'm only doing maybe 15 or 20. Just really concentrating on the squeeze. It's very easy to just push out from the knee and the foot here, but I'm really engaging the glute first and just trying to hold that squeeze point and that short end of the range of motion and just really get those glutes really stimulated and ready to work. Just pretty much doing the same thing on the hamstring curl here. It's just literally about 6 or 7 reps, just holding for a couple of seconds, even going into slightly more hip extension with the knees coming up off the pad, just to fully get that hamstring short, get it fired up, get it ready for the big compound that's coming. So from here, this is the first time in a long time I've done the hip thruster. So what I did is I put it in as my first exercise for the session, but it's really still just activation drill. I did 3 sets of sort of 8 to 12, going nowhere really near fatigue, but just really concentrating on getting those glutes firing on each rep, locking the rib cage down and just getting good hip position at the top to maximize the glute activation through the reps. So yeah, in the following weeks I will start to increase the weight on that one, but really just trying to get a good squeeze. So then when I go into the rack pulls that I'm going to be doing as my first major movement for the session, I know that whole posterior chain is, really stimulated and firing optimally. Before I deadlift or squat, I always do some dead bugs. It's a great exercise to get the core fired up, to help resist spine extension, a little bit of lateral rotation. If there's a weakness in my spine, it's definitely in extension. Like it doesn't handle extension forces well. So I've got to really work on holding a solid brace, keeping my rib cage down and not allowing my lumbar curve to increase. Have had some problems in the past with really aggravating my spine, chasing weight that probably I wasn't ready for. So really just introducing these exercises back in. I have been working on a deadlift for the last 12 weeks or so, but just going really slow, just sets of kind of 8.5 out of 10 for an RPE and not really over, just getting the confidence back with these movements. So also just doing a 30-second or 20 to 30-second hold on each side with the side plank, just to really get the internal and external obliques firing, just so there's a good connection between the upper body and the lower body. They connect the rib cage to the pelvis. So I find that again really helps creating a good structural feeling through the torso. And then just loading the plank for about 15 to 20 seconds and holding quite a posteriorly tilted pelvis, and a fairly flat lower back. So really tucking the pelvis under, pulling the rib cage down, and just holding just above horizontal, I guess, having the hips slightly above, the shoulder. So just switching on all those muscles that will help me to resist extension forces. So everything up to this point is really just, preparing for loading as safely as possible. The name of the game with me is really injury prevention, progression, but injury prevention. I love my training, so injuries are something that I want to do everything I can to avoid. So here I am, I worked up to I think 115 kilos for 7 or 8 reps on the rack pull. One thing I do like about doing these videos is I video myself a lot and I can look back on it. I could probably have my hips a little bit lower with this one, but it felt pretty good. I definitely felt like there was a good balance of pushing and pulling from the exercise, so I kind of enjoyed that. The body felt like it was moving kind of how I wanted to. Then I moved on to a few sets of I think it was 3 by 20 on the leg press. It was a high and wide, really trying to use the hamstrings and glutes as much as possible. Some key things with the leg press is know your active range of motion and don't go deeper than it. You should be able to maintain a neutral lower back position in the bottom position. Your hips should not come off the bench. You can see how hard I'm pulling myself into the seat to maintain that, and just every rep on the way down I'm really just working in my range of motion and driving through the heels, really loading the hamstrings and glutes as much as possible. My feet could have been maybe a fraction higher, but I was happy with how it was feeling. I was going pretty wide and just driving from the bottom part of my glutes and up into the adductors and the hamstrings for that one. So it was good to do a few of those. Hadn't been on the leg press in 18 months or so, so I'm looking forward to seeing how the weight progresses there.
We could stay here, you and I.
And then I finished it off with some hanging gar hammer raises, just working on that lower and mid abdominal with a good, probably very quick 2-second pause at the top. Trying not to let the knees go much below the hip, and just making sure I initiate that up phase with my abdominals and trying to really minimize the momentum or the swing through the upper body, which is a little bit inevitable when you're kind of on your strength limit. But looking back on the video, I was kind of happy with how it looked. Once I couldn't do any more with the weight, just dropped that down and did a few more at body weight. And that was paired for 3 sets of each on the reverse hyper. It was a real glute focus, reverse hyper. I'm holding posterior pelvic tilt here. I'm not coming up as high as I possibly can. I'm coming up to I feel it really contract as hard as possible in the glute, and using as little lower back as possible on this machine, which is very difficult, but really trying to just get that really solid lockout on the glute, and trying to lock that in for a second. Did as many as I could with a pause at the top, and then finished the set off with a few partials. And that was pretty much me done for the day. With this one, I'm really pushing away, not just straight up, and I'm contracting and holding my rib cage down. We definitely want to eliminate, rib cage flare on this exercise, so we don't over aggravate the facet joints or the lower spine in general. And then to finish off the session, as I always do, just jumping in the recovery position, feet above the torso, just to get the blood flow back into the digestive system, and just signal to the nervous system that the session is over. I find if I don't do this, my cortisol stays quite high for longer than it should, so I always finish off a session in this position for about 5 minutes, nice slow inhalation. Then I will double that amount of time for the hold, and then I will do the same for the out breath, really long slow exhale, and I will stay there until I feel like, usually I will yawn and I will really start to feel kind of almost sleepy and calm. It's probably about a 4 or a 5 minute thing, probably minimum, and I find that just signals the recovery process to start ASAP. And I just feel heaps better if I finish my sessions off that way. Anyway guys, that's today done. If you enjoyed it or you have any questions, leave a comment below, and I'll see you in the next one.